Se habla de crisis financiera, se habla de crisis o versus crisis global, ¿no? ¿Cómo impacta esto en las clases sociales de menores recursos? Y la otra parte de la pregunta es si se puede salir de este atolladero, que es la crisis mundial, diría yo, sin que esto impacte fuertemente en clases sociales bajas, ¿no? Porque hasta ahora no se han visto muchas manifestaciones sociales en contra de esta crisis.
Yeah. Well, the impact on the lower classes is again, varies a great deal. For example, some countries are very heavily dependent upon remittances, say from the United States to Haiti. When things went bad in New York, a lot of the maids got laid off, and the remittances going to Mexico, Haiti, fell by about 1/3. The same thing happened in the Gulf states when things started to go wrong in Dubai, that remittances to India and to the Philippines started to fall off. So the lower classes got hit in those countries by this. The other thing that happens is that when the state economizes, and the financial crisis has largely been solved at the expense of state money bailouts. We are now looking at a situation, as in Greece, of a fiscal crisis of states. And the answer that is now being proposed pretty much universally throughout the G20 is austerity, which is completely the wrong policy in my view if you wanted to save capitalism. So they propose austerity. So you get, say in Britain, a set of policies now coming in which are about cutting back on social services, and there are calculations that say it's the lower income population who's going to be most severely hit. If you look at the austerity that's occurring in California, it's on public education, public health care, public services. Again, it's the poor who get hit hardest by this. So we are seeing a differential impact in which the lower classes, by and large, are being hit disproportionately. So they're bearing the brunt of the crisis. The bankers are doing fine. They're getting their bonuses back. But the poor are paying. And this is the class project that has been ongoing since the 1970s, and it continues to go on. Now, I'm kind of surprised that there's not been more public, political movement against it, but we will see. Maybe there will be some.
Hubo una tendencia de los estados, fundamentalmente, bueno, en Estados Unidos y en Europa, ¿no?, de salir a salvar a esta crisis, o salir por lo menos a atenuarla, poniendo muchísimo dinero, ¿no? Mucho dinero fundamentalmente para salvar al sistema financiero.
Yeah.
La pregunta ¿es esto una actitud de salvarse a sí mismo como clase?
Sometimes it looks like that. There's very interesting question as to whether a class saves itself or whether the class saves capitalism. And right now, I think the class is more about saving itself than it really is saving capitalism. If they really wanted to save capitalism, I think they would go to a more Keynesian kind of policy instead of the monetarist austerity policy that they are going for. So I think it's more about the class saving itself and saving its own wealth and power, which it has been doing since the 1970s onwards. I mean, look at all of the data. The amount of social inequality in the United States has risen immensely, and it's risen almost everywhere. And even in the crisis, the number of billionaires in India doubled last year in the midst of the crisis. So you see the class is doing very well. It's the rest of us are doing very poorly.
Si tuviera que visualizar una salida ideal para todo esto, ¿no?, de acá al futuro, ¿cuál es su visión sobre esto? ¿Cuál es su visión sobre este sistema ideal para buscar una solución y qué alternativas, en todo caso, se pueden visualizar?
I think there's a short-term possibility for capitalism, which is to take a Keynesian path. But a Keynesian path would mean you'd have to re-empower labor. That's the core of the Keynesian solution. Because right now the capitalists are far too powerful and labor is far too weak. and you have to re-empower labor so that labor can actually recuperate much more income, which then creates the market. And you're beginning to see that happen in China. Social movements in China have grown up in the factories, and wages have increased by about 20 or 30% in China. So the one part of the world which is taking a Keynesian path is China, and they've been growing at around 8–10% per year. Now that's a short-term solution, and my view of this is that it would be a short-term saving of capital from itself by going that path, but I don't think that's sustainable into the future. The Keynesian solution, it cannot be permanent. It always was contra-cyclical, and the assumption always was you'll come out of the crisis and then you can recuperate the debt. Now, we don't actually have that possibility right now, so I think the Keynesian solution is not a long-run solution. The long-run solution has to be about trying to find some alternative way of organizing production and distribution and consumption around a different set of mechanisms other than those which are contained in free market capitalism.
Muy bien. David, Harvey, le agradecemos mucho que nos haya visitado, le deseamos una muy buena estadía en nuestro país. Le agradecemos también a Jorge. Jorge, no sé si querías preguntarle algo, porque además de hablar inglés, sos profesor de economía, sos economista, digo, por ahí quedó algo en el tintero que te gustaría preguntarle
no, lo único
a David
preguntarle es acerca de, vemos con preocupación en América Latina los movimientos sociales en Europa que solamente levemente reaccionan, pero también, ya que está en América Latina, ¿cuál es la visión que tiene David Harvey sobre América Latina? Which is your vision about Latin America in this moment?
Well, I think you have escaped the worst of the crisis. To some degree, I think that has to do with the reorientation of Latin America towards China and the China trade, which has grown very vigorously, which has a good side and a bad side. The good side is that as a raw material producer, you're winning. But if you think you're going to be able to produce shoes and leather goods, forget it. Your industry is going to be driven out very shortly. So I see the vision of Latin America is very difficult within the structure of global capitalism as it's emerging around the relationship to China and the reorientation from the United States. The other thing, however, is of course you have progressive governments in Latin America that are exploring different possibilities. You see it in Bolivia, you see it in Venezuela, you see it, there's a great deal of variation throughout Latin America, but I think many of us look on Latin America as a place where things can be said and ideas can be pursued that cannot be pursued elsewhere. So it's a great place to visit to get excited about new ideas and new possibilities.
Bueno, nuevamente muchas gracias David Harvey por haberse venido hasta aquí para realizar esta entrevista y le agradecemos mucho. Seguimos en el cuarto encuentro de Economía. Nosotros ahora terminamos, pero seguramente volveremos a encontrarnos en otra ocasión.